Good afternoon, friends. Welcome back to this episode of Through Literary Lens. This is our second coming, Vinodji.
Yes, second coming in the sense that we have already completed a century of literary videos.
Yes, friends, and you have been enjoying the century.
Yes, so this is a journey towards the second century. And this reminds us
Yeah,
of a great poem, a well known poem by the same name, that is The Second Coming,
by William Butler Yeats.
popularly known as W.B.
W.B.
Yeats.
Yeats.
He was contemporary of T.S. Eliot. He came from Ireland,
Ireland.
and he wrote in both the languages, Irish as well as English.
English, yes.
And he was well versed with poetry and drama.
And he was a very rich symbolist, I would say. When you read his poetry, you can't fail to be struck by his symbolism. And his symbols, Vinodji,
Yes.
they are rich and complex.
Yes, on the one hand, they are rich and complex. On the other hand, W.B. Yeats is considered to be one of the most difficult poets so far as the interpretation of the poetry is concerned, precisely because he uses personal symbols.
Yeah, I mean, we must explain what these personal symbols are there. Actually, there are four levels
Yes.
of symbolism. First of all, language itself, the words stand for something. So, language in itself is a symbol, which
Yes.
most of us don't realize actually.
Yes.
But it is a level one symbolism, we can say. I say hand. HAND, hand signifies nothing. When we associate it with a particular organ of the body, and then it becomes a hand, becomes a symbol of actual hand.
Yeah,
Is
for
it?
example, the sound of a chair
Chair.
brings before us an idea of particular object. Table, it is a sound, but it brings before you a particular wooden shaped, four legged plank.
Yeah, so this is the very first level of symbolism, which most of us even don't really consciously recognize that it's a symbol, but
Yes.
it's symbol. Second level of symbolism is traditional symbols, customary symbols,
Yes.
which are prevalent for centuries, maybe in a given culture or universally also.
Sometimes these symbols are understood in all the languages. For
Yeah.
example, water is a symbol of purification.
Purification. Then rose, maybe the symbol of love, maybe the symbol of delicacy, right? So such symbols are almost universally understood,
Yes.
we can say. The third level of symbolism depends on a particular context.
Context.
They are not generally understood. What do they signify? But in a given context, they may symbolize certain things, and they may be very complex symbols.
And
Also,
usually these contexts arise out of cultural conditions,
cultural,
social
mythology.
social conditions. For example, when we said in India, I went and took a dip in the Ganges.
Yeah.
It is not simply taking a dip in a river,
Yeah.
but taking a dip in the Ganges. That means you have been washed of your sins. Your sins have disappeared after you took a bath in the river Ganges.
But this is a symbol peculiar to Indian culture and Indian mythology. And
Because
Indian
the
religion.
river Ganga is considered to be holy river, and anybody who goes and takes a dip in the Ganges is washed off his sins.
Yeah. So this level of symbolism, we call it third level of symbolism.
Yes.
And it may be a slightly difficult to understand because it is context dependent or culture dependent. Maybe culture is one of the contexts. Some other contexts may also be there.
Yes, yes.
Fourth level of symbolism is personal symbolism or stipulative symbolism, we can call it, where the symbols are created by the author out of his or her personal domain, personal experience, and then they are conveyed to the readers with the hope that that symbolism would be understood.
And therefore, this kind of symbolism requires some commentary by the critics. Once critics explain the significance and value of these personal symbols, only then
Only
they
then.
become understandable.
Yeah, W.B. Yeats' poetry abounds with such sort of contextual but more so personal symbolism, which we have to understand in order to understand his poetry. But this discussion of the four levels of symbolism is always essential to appreciate any kind of literature for that matter, isn't it?
Yes, yes, and especially those who
Yeah.
want to learn literature, the
Yeah.
students of literature of UG and PG programs,
Yeah.
they must take some time off to understand these four levels of symbolism.
Otherwise, what happens many a times, we are just put off by the words and images used in a poem or a piece of literature because they don't make sense at the first level. Literally speaking, they are absurd many a times.
And interesting, Rajeshji,
Yeah.
there are many writers and poets,
Yeah.
even they do not take the labor of understanding these various levels of symbolism.
Yeah.
And therefore, they simply are bogged up when they try to understand a particular piece of literature.
Yeah. Or then third level of symbolism, people really can't connect because they can't connect to the context
And
of the
therefore, it
particular
is
symbols.
necessary that any good reader
Yeah.
or especially creative writer must be well read in various domains of knowledge.
Definitely. And then when contextualizing the symbols, it is not always the case that you can relate them to the first level of symbolism. They may undergo a transformation also. They may not literally correspond to your first level many a times.
Now, coming back to
Yeah.
this W.B. Yeats poem, The Second Coming,
Coming.
the very title, The Second Coming,
Yeah.
is
It's
a symbolic.
Yeah.
And there is no universal significance to this phrase second coming. Although this phrase primarily comes from the Old Testament,
Yeah.
right, where the Jews are waiting for the second coming of Moses. And majority of Jews believed that Jesus was the second coming of Moses, so they got converted into Christianity. But many are still there who are still waiting for the second coming. So this is the primary symbolism of this phrase, the second coming.
And you may as well elaborately generalize it to the like concept of avatars,
Yes.
which we have here in Hindu mythology in Eastern countries. So there have been 9 avatars of the supreme deity called Vishnu.
Yes.
And we are awaiting the 10th avatar. We means in general, it is culturally believed that 10th avatar of Vishnu would take place, and again the world will be restored to the pristine beauty.
Now, W.B. Yeats attaches altogether new symbolic meaning to this biblical phrase, the second coming.
Yeah.
He believes that every after
2000
2000
years.
years,
It's a cyclical view of history.
yes, the entire civilization undergoes a dramatic change.
Either a divine force or the devilish force interferes with the happenings, and again it begins anew for the good or for the worse.
Now, this poem was written almost 100 years ago. It was written in 1920s or 1930s.
1990.
1990.
Yeah.
So exactly more than 100 years ago.
Yes.
So at that time, 20th century was still there, and he expresses his belief that by the turn of the century, that is by the end of the 20th century, Christian civilization would come to an end, because Christian civilization is founded on great virtues and values, that is mercy, pity, peace and love. But at the end of the century, the new civilization will be all about. It will come into being. And that, he says, is the second coming. Now, what kind of this civilization is going to be? He says this civilization is going to be violent civilization. And in the second part of the poem, although this poem is a very small
Only 22 lines.
22 lines.
But the first part depicts the decay of the civilization, and the second part concerns with the vision, which he gets, a disturbing vision of an animal, half lion and with human head.
Yeah, so
Body
we
of
will
the-
discuss, second part first, line number 16 onwards,
Yeah.
right? There was a monstrous being, a half lion, half human being, and it slowly moves
In the desert.
from towards Bethlehem.
For Bethlehem.
And
to be born.
again, this Bethlehem is important because
Very rich symbolism. All the 3 religions of the book, what we call them,
yes,
Christianity,
Huh.
Islam, and Judaism.
yes,
They regard it as holy.
holy place, right? So the Christian civilization, Jewish civilization, they started from Bethlehem, and this new civilization, which is going to be a violent civilization, is also going to take place from that place itself.
Now, this beast is body of the lion with the head of the human. This is very conveys a
Frightening.
very frightening, because the body of the lion violent, but the intellect of the human. And and it is said, Vinodji, that
Yes.
this poem actually foretells the violent 20th century. After World War I, it was written, and World War II, and all the horrors of Holocaust and everything, it in a way foretold.
Symbolically, W.B. Yeats tries to say that by the end of the 20th century, modern people will forget the great message of Jesus, the message of love, the message of compassion, and they will carry out wide scale violence,
Violence.
destruction,
Yeah, blood
wars,
tide.
blood tide. And human beings are there. We are intellect people, we are intellectual people, rational people. But what exactly we are doing? Even right now, we stand on the brink of the World War
Three.
III.
Yeah.
So this is a very disturbing image that poet
Because with
sees.
the head of the human, we have unleashed the great destructive forces of energy and the body of the lion,
Yes.
naturally.
And in the preceding lines, line number 1 to line number 15, 16, poet is gradually telling us that how earlier civilization is falling apart.
Falcon cannot hear the falconer.
Again, this is a symbolic way of
Symbolic.
saying that the spirit of discord is universal.
Center cannot hold. The things fall apart. Center cannot hold.
Yeah. The wise lack all
All
conviction.
connection.
Fools are
full
full
of
of
passionate
passionate intensity.
intensity.
When you take these lines even out of the context of this
Yeah,
poem,
yeah.
still they hold meaning. Now, what he's trying to say that everything has become chaotic when falcon cannot hear the falconer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Gyrates, they spiral, and the circle becomes wider and wider till finally it loses all the cohesion.
yes, so cohesion is disappearing. Something which is cementing in human life is disappearing. That is, each human being is getting separated from one another, not physically but emotionally, spiritually, socially, psychologically. For example, there is no connection between head and heart. We are simply pulled into the various directions.
Yes.
It reminds of Matthew Arnold, who says we live thousand different lives.
Yes. Half-willed.
Half-filled.
So that tragedy of fragmented existence,
Yes.
and will and intellect not being aware of the compassion and good intentions and conscience devoid of will devoid of conscience.
So there
That
is
is the
no
tragedy.
communication between matter and spirit. There is no connection between intellect and emotion. There is no connection what one does and what one desires.
And then from the spiritus mundi, this image, this vision of this beastly vision which occurs to the
Comes
poet.
from a spiritus mundi.
And
Now
what
this is a personal symbol.
Yeah, this is a very personal symbol, and most close to it is Vinodji, what Jung called the collective unconscious.
Yes, collective unconscious.
Or when Yeats read Madame Blavatsky's book, and from there he got this anima mundi, that reservoir of all that has touched the human beings. One can invoke the disembodied forces by occult magic.
So it
and
is
all.
a storehouse
Yeah.
of all the images, all the symbols
Yes.
that we are capable of
of.
thinking.
So from that, this beastly vision arises. This is also very disturbing. Why the collective unconscious has become so degenerate that earlier in the earlier line, if you see, he says some revelation is at hand.
Yeah, some revelation is at hand. Second coming is at
Second
hand.
coming, but what is that second coming? That's a
And
beastly
in
vision.
this title of the poem all of a sudden acquires ironic symbolism, because human race has been waiting for the second coming of Moses. But ironically enough, what we get, we get this beastly image.
So is this the second coming? Is this the way the transformation is going to happen? And is it for the good or for the worst?
Really, when we look at this image, the entire milieu of the poem becomes very depressing, very disheartening, and very disturbing as well. Where human civilization is going, where human beings are going after all.
And then 20 centuries of stony sleep are vexed to a nightmare.
Yes,
Isn't
that means
it?
all our waiting for this long 20 centuries ultimately is going to end in this disturbing vision.
It is a Frankensteinish vision, with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, we remember. So in this way, and it moves also in the vision, the beast moves also, and the desert birds are frightened.
Yes. So the image of fear, this image of terror basically. And in between, we already made
Yeah.
mention, the wise lack all conviction.
Conviction, and the fools are full of passionate intensity.
And Rajaji,
जी.
let me share this
हाँ.
opinion
हाँ.
that in all the domains of life, we experience this.
Yes.
Those who are really wise, they are so frightened, or they have been frightened
They've been
basically,
frightened. Yeah.
and they lack all conviction because they do not know how to proceed now in this kind of chaotic environment.
Because they know certainty is impossible.
Yes.
And when there is any slightest room for doubt, they don't want to impose their opinions on others.
And on the other hand, the fools are full of passionate
Passionate
intensity.
intensity.
So you see, in all the domains of life, those who do not have the wisdom, those who do not have knowledge and skill, they are at the helm of the affairs. And that is really the point of trouble.
And this gathering gloom of Yeats, which he has poured in this poem, actually at that time, this flu pandemic
Yes.
was also raging.
Yeah,
and
Spanish
his own
flu was there.
Spanish flu. His
And the
pregnant
World War
wife
First had just ended.
just ended. His pregnant wife almost died in that Spanish flu, and many people, millions of people throughout the world died actually. So this gathering gloom of impending doom troubled Yeats beyond measure, and therefore the second coming itself has become questionable, that whether it is really for good or for worse.
Even after 100 years since this poem was written, I do not see that the situation has really changed. Gloom is all around, despair is all around, destruction is all around, fear is all around, terrorism is all around, insecurity is all around, all around. So again, we see how prophetic W.B. Yeats is, and that is the greatness of the poet.
Yes.
Whatever he says, whether it is positive or negative, it has got a universal significance, universal appeal, and universal value as well. So friends,
I believe, friends, this beastly image, horrifying image, vision of, lion-bodied beast with the human head will definitely disturb you in your dreams.
yes, read this poem and try to ponder upon the current situation of this world. Can we really improve it? So this is the question. We leave it for you to ponder upon. Thank you very
Namaskar.
much for listening to this channel.